Have you ever felt like everyone else knows what they're doing when you've got no clue? Do you sometimes believe your success is all about luck, but your failings, the things that have gone wrong, come down to you? Do you wonder when the fraud police are going to kick down the door and drag you from your desk? Now, if the answer is yes to any of these, hello and welcome to the Imposter Club. The good and the bad news is it's not a very exclusive club at all. In fact, almost all of us will be a member of this club at some stage in their life. So in today's podcast, I'm going to chat with my good friend Louise Bedford, who's got a degree in psychology, about what the experts say is happening in your brain when you feel like a fraudster and how to try and push through those feelings. It's called imposter syndrome, or sometimes imposter phenomenon or fraud syndrome, and it's a term used to describe the psychological experience of feeling like you don't deserve your success. Now, by the way, this is very common even amongst very successful investors. So even if you don't really feel that way now, you're going to get so much from this podcast. At the end, you'll understand the psychology that helps successful people power on. Now, imposter syndrome's not really a diagnosable mental health condition, but it's a feeling like you're fake that can be linked to anxiety and depression. And every year, for 5 days, I lock myself up in the room with some very, very successful investors, entrepreneurs, business people at Wealth Retreat. And interestingly, a common trait amongst even the most successful of us is that somehow or other, we're not good enough. A lot of it's linked to what we heard, what we saw, what we experienced as a child. Now, imposter syndrome tends to be more common for people who are high achievers, and some of them just can't quite accept their achievements. People experience imposter syndrome in various ways, but some common signs are perfectionism, not recognising a success because you can only focus on the flaws, the things that aren't working right. It's also experienced with people who are overworking as a way of just avoiding finishing a product or a project or keeping going. I guess it relates to perfectionism because they don't want to be judged. It occurs in people who undermine their own achievements, pointing out your mistakes before taking ownership of your success, procrastinating and leaving things to the last minute and then having to rush to finish them. I guess another way it shows is fear of failure, putting off starting something, avoiding taking on new challenges, reluctant to ask feedback as you can't face the potential of failing. Or another way I see some very successful people exhibit imposter syndrome is discounting praise, pointing out other people's contributions before your own, assuming praise is being exaggerated or fake, that people don't really appreciate you. Boy, there's lots of ways this shows itself. So in this longer show today, I'm going to have a chat with Louise Bedford. You're going to understand more about imposter syndrome. You'll see where it may or may not be affecting you or holding you back. And even if it doesn't affect you, I bet you're going to recognise a few people close to you that should know about imposter syndrome. And if that's the case, let them know about this podcast. So welcome to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
Louise Bedford here. Picture this scene. George has just made a huge win and he is so excited about his investment, but then within a blink of an eye, he starts having some creepy voices sneak into his subconscious and they tell him, yeah, that was easy money. And they also say, oh, I was so lucky with that one. It won't happen again. I'm such a fraud. Have you ever felt that way? Because I'm sure you have. And I'm really here to discuss with Michael Yardney, my friend, this imposter syndrome, this culture of doom that we bring on ourselves. And when Michael and I were talking about this the other day at lunch, we felt this information was just far too valuable to let this slide. That's why we've got this podcast organised today. So welcome to the show, Michael. I know this is your show as well.
Thanks. Yeah, look, as we discussed it, we thought we're seeing it so often amongst the clients we deal with, the people we deal with in all walks of life, that we've really got to make it public because most people don't know what's going on in their head.
So true, so true. And just so that everybody's got the right background on who we are and what we're aiming to do here, as both of us know our backgrounds, Michael, there's no doubt. But I'm a best-selling author of 5 books on the share market, and I'm founder of tradinggame.com.au. Now, I feel so strongly about the imposter syndrome. I've actually even developed a special report, a free special report for every listener of this podcast. So to get that special report, you go to tradinggame.com.au/imposter. And that will be the follow-up from this podcast, tradinggame.com.au/imposter. Now, Michael, maybe a little bit about your background.
Well, first of all, I really like that you gave that link up front. How often have you been on webcasts or podcasts and they make you stay till right at the end to trick you to stay there till you get the bonus? So that was very generous of you. So me, well, we've been good friends for a long time and business colleagues and unreasonable friends to each other as part of our own mastermind group. But I've written 8 books on property. I've actually had one of them now published in 5 languages overseas. The one on rich habits, poor habits, because apart from property, my real interest is in the psychology of success, the psychology of wealth. And I am the founder of Metropole, a group of companies that helps our clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice, Louise.
Fantastic. Look, Michael, I think that's why we're both in such a good position to chat about this, because I think that term imposter phenomenon or imposter complex, imposter syndrome, it is just so pervasive, and it doesn't just affect people who are perhaps on the lower end of the socioeconomic cycle. It's also people who have an amazing wealth mindset. They have that thought that, oh no, maybe I fluked it, or maybe it's all going away tomorrow, and it's just so debilitating. So this has been my pet love to investigate this. So maybe I'll provide a little bit of background about how this all came about, and then we can start getting into some of the things that you can do to avoid that imposter thinking. Because the more we can do to increase our wealth mindset, the more money will stay in our account. Would you agree, Michael?
Well, clearly it's us who stops ourselves getting to the next level of wealth. We're driving around with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brakes. We've got these empowering beliefs and these disempowering beliefs. And it's those little voices in your head that stop you. So maybe, Louise, we can start with what is the imposter syndrome? Because people may not know what the name means, but when you explain what's going on, they'll think, aha, yeah, I thought that way once.
Way back when I studied a psychology degree, I did 4 years of psychology, and I've got a business degree as well. But when I was in that psychology degree, learning about it, I actually found this lady who I really related with, Pauline Clance, and she's since become a friend of mine. She's quite a mature lady now, actually. Her idea, and she put this together with her friend Suzanne Imes, a colleague of hers. She termed that phrase, and it was back in the 1970s. Now, the way that I think about it, it is that little evil voice, that one that says you're never going to achieve, or if you have achieved, you won't be able to hang on to that wealth or that success. Now, from what Pauline tells me, there are 3 main components behind this thinking. Firstly, it's feeling like a fake. It's thinking that, I'm such a fraud. Everybody's going to find out I don't know what I'm talking about. The other component is where we disregard praise and achievements. And later on in that podcast that we're doing together, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we can build that muscle, where we flex that muscle of accepting praise and accepting achievement-oriented language around ourselves so that we don't disregard that praise from people who do know what they're talking about. And the third aspect of imposter thinking is that we attribute successes to good luck. Now, this is so evil because with my traders, I look after traders at tradinggame.com.au. Sometimes they'll make a heck of a profit and then they'll say, oh, it was because the market was going up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it just makes my heart ache for them. So I'm sure, Michael, with your property investors, that you'd have examples of people either feeling like a fake, disregarding praise and achievements, and also attributing successes to good luck. Do you find that that's also prevalent in the property people that you're looking after?
Well, not just the property people, but just wealth creation in general. A lot of people feel they don't deserve it. And this goes way back to childhood when they were told things about money and about wealth and about rich people. They're often told about filthy rich or dirty money. I mean, dirty money probably came from the fact that when you were a child, what do kids do with money? They put it in their mouth, and parents say, don't put money in your mouth, it's dirty. But then there's these other people who, they're driving a fancy car and they've got a nice home, and so it makes you feel better if it was luck that created their wealth, or they did it some way wrong. But people then, as an adult, still carry these unconscious beliefs, these poor beliefs that then become poor habits, that your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions lead to your results. And if you suddenly come into wealth, whether it's in property, whether it's in lottery, whether it's in inheritance, I just see people over and over again sabotage themselves. And it just doesn't make sense from the outside. It's not logical what they do. But it's the old story of what happens to lottery winners if they suddenly get this windfall. After a few years they lost it. I think it's much the same, Louise, if you took all the money in the world and distributed it evenly, it'd be back in the same proportions again, just because of where people's mindset is, their wealth operating system is set for. And some people are just not able to get to the next level. And it's, again, part of this as well, because they don't believe that they belong there.
Oh, look, I'm glad that you mentioned that, especially self-sabotage. So Pauline Rose Clance, she has just been fantastic for me. We've had chats on the phone about this, about how it relates to trading and investing. And some of the conversations that we've had, we've discussed the importance of longevity as an investor and as a trader. And one of the things that I'm sure you'd relate with as well is that people quit too early, and if they have imposter thinking, they are much more likely to quit early. If you really believe it's luck, but that your wins were generated purely from outside forces, then why would you stick with something when you're getting told that, hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong? In the markets, there are so many little losses that we have to endure. It's, wrong, 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 right, woohoo, wrong, wrong, wrong. So because of that environment, that quitting trading aspect with those that have the imposter syndrome, that can actually be such a prevalent thought process. And the other effect, and I'm interested in hearing your views on this, is that I've noticed the traders who have imposter thinking, they're very likely to become very course or work focused. They become seminar junkies. They think that somebody else knows more than them. There's some holy grail. They don't realize that the answer to their own success lies within them. So often they work too many hours a day. They throw themselves into too many courses. They focus too much on the detail without the big picture. And that's an unintended consequence of the imposter thinking that I think really has a siege in people's minds, a war going on. They hope for the best, but they don't really believe that they're worthy, and they focus too much on the work aspect. Have you seen that at all, Michael?
Well, you mentioned two separate things here. The first one is the giving up early. And boy, do we see that in business. So dealing with a lot of business people, you run a business, I run a business. Part of running a business is having those challenges, those problems all the time. And there's two ways you can handle them. And I remember years ago, I used to come into work during the global financial crisis and times were tough. And I thought, is it worth it all? And my business coach, because it's important to have coaches, it's important to have mentors. My business coach said to me, Michael, you're the boss. It's your job to solve problems. If somebody else could solve those problems, they'd be the boss. And when I suddenly realized that, hey, okay, that's my job today. What are the problems? No, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find a way around it. Because if I can, when other people give up, that has created longevity in my business. And we similarly have been together with Chris Tate doing this for a long, long time, while you see the others come and go. Now, there's more to it than just having perseverance and persistence. You've got to have the right business model. You've got to have integrity. You've got to be able to help your customers, clients, patients. Otherwise, you're never going to survive. But the first point you made about longevity is important in property, because at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to jump out because the property market's going through the downward phase of the cycle. But I know over the years that after every winter comes spring. In fact, that's probably happened for 10,000 years or as long as the calendar's been around. And I'm prepared to put my money that spring's going to come after winter this time too, because it always has. So no, you don't give up. That's one element of what you said. As for the other point you made, Louise, with regard to people wanting more information, whether they go to seminars, go to another course, they think that is going to make the big difference. I need an edge. I need something special. I don't have enough yet. In fact, successful people, whether it's traders, property investors, business people, they're prepared to take action, knowing they don't know it all yet and knowing they're going to get the rest along the way. So in my mind, to be successful in anything in life, you need to have knowledge, but that's not enough. You need to have perseverance, like you said a moment ago. That's not enough. You also have to take concentrated, focused action on the knowledge, the information you've got. Because in this world, you get paid for what you do with what you know, you don't get paid in this world for what you know, Louise.
I like that. And the other aspect is the self-sabotage side. Now, I've got a little anecdote here, Michael. My daughter, she's 11 years old now, Miss Ashley is. Now, Ashley has been struggling with maths at school because it isn't something that comes naturally to us all. And we've been doing some fantastic online little courses. They're tiny little, this is how you do this particular aspect of maths on a video, and then she does a little test. Now, what I've found is that when she does well in something, she says, it's because it was an easy topic. And when she doesn't do well, she goes, it's because I don't know how to do maths.
Isn't that interesting? But the great thing is you are there helping her. Isn't that the sort of thing I would have liked my parents to do, your parents, we would like your parents to do, because we are our parents' mentors. A moment ago, we talked about the importance of having mentors. Sorry, I said it the wrong way around. We are our children's mentors. We're their best mentors. So therefore, we can prevent the next generation from getting imposter syndrome by instilling courage in them, by instilling self-confidence in them, by helping them. I was never very good at maths. That was always my worst subject. But you know what, Louise? I was better than my parents. They were even worse.
And I've always found if I attach a dollar sign to the maths problem, then, hey, it all of a sudden becomes personal and I want to make that money so I can do the maths. It's funny how it goes. And one of the aspects that we've found as well is that growth mindset concept has really come into play here. So just to remind us all about that, we've got either the fixed mindset where you think that you will never improve, you can't do this skill, so you'll never be able to do this skill. You think that IQ is fixed. And then we've also got the growth mindset. So that's the opposite. I can always grow. I can always learn more. Of course, I can improve my own intelligence. And what they've found in a few different studies, Michael, is that if you tell children, you are so clever at maths, you would think that's a compliment, wouldn't you? I mean, I think it's quite an easy thing to say to a kid. What we're aiming to do with our children is rather than say, you're clever, you need to say, didn't you work hard? Didn't you try so hard? Didn't you throw some hours at that? Didn't you finish your homework? Isn't that great? Because if you tie it to work, then the child themselves realizes that through work, they can achieve. And I think that's really important. So having in mind that growth mindset is very, very essential. So rather than telling a kid that you're clever, tell them that you worked hard. And that is the thing.
This is obviously very useful for your children, but what you pointed out a while ago was so important, I'd like to reiterate it, that IQ is not fixed. There's been lots of scientific evidence of this, and there are a number of ways of increasing your IQ. Probably the time for a different chat. I know you speak about it at Wealth Retreat, and I'm sure you've spoken to your mentorees about the concept that there are certain mental exercises you can do, aerobic exercise, learning, reading, learning new languages, musical instruments, has actually been scientifically shown to increase your IQ. So, yeah, people have. I was told I was dumb. My father, I still remember how my father was disappointed that I only came second in the class, not first.
Oh.
And that scarred me for a long, long time, Louise.
I've got a very smart sister. She is super, super smart. Anytime I got an A at school, I'd say to myself, well, you're not as smart as she is. Maybe it was just an easy test. Things will get back to normal soon. And the other thing I've found with imposter thinking, with my own mindset, I've said to myself some terrible things. It's just like, it's unbelievable. Sometimes we're not our own best friend, are we? Like my business partner, Chris Tate, he is a trading genius. And sometimes I've even thought to myself, no wonder he's making more money because he's just so clever. And Michael, I've said that about you too. I've thought, well, it's just a matter of time until I stuff up my business because I'm not like Michael.
Well, there's a little confession, isn't there? Yesterday, true story, I was discussing this with one of my team members, one of our staff, who actually said to me, Michael, do you still have self-limiting beliefs? And I said, to be honest, I do. Really? They were surprised. See, once a year, you and I get together at Wealth Retreat with about 50 very successful business people, entrepreneurs, investors, traders, and others would look from the outside and look in and say, what are they doing there? Why would they go into a room and spend $10,000 in 5 days to improve themselves? And the answer is because they recognize that even at the level they've achieved, they've all got self-doubts. They've all got a level of the imposter syndrome. They're all still driving around with one foot on the accelerator and maybe not pressing as hard on the brake this time round. So I guess one of the important things to tell people listening to this is, hey, you're normal. It's okay. But first of all, you've got to recognize it. Then you've got to remove these disempowering beliefs and you've got to replace them with more empowering beliefs, Louise.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I often think if you described your achievements as if it was somebody else, would you be impressed? Because I'm guessing you would be if you look at all of the things that you've achieved. And I've even called my little voice the inner lunatic. Now, my little inner lunatic, I've just decided that I'm not going to give it any light. It tells me things like, why could I possibly want more here? Because really, it's just so selfish. Of course, we should want more. Getting that stone in the shoe, that kind of uncomfortable feeling, that feeling that, hey, I deserve more, I'm worth more, I can achieve more. That's what drives success, not my stupid little inner lunatic's voice. It says to me things like, stay small because growing big is scary. It says, what if I stick my neck out and I lose money? If I lose my money, I'm worthless. That's my little inner lunatic. It's not a very fun little crazy person there, but it's certainly voicey and loud. I don't know about yours, Michael. What does yours say to you?
Well, I think this is a normal human protection mechanism that goes back to the days when we were cavemen, to our ancestors, because it's a protective mechanism. Your brain is designed to keep you in a safe place. And if it's okay here and safe here, why would you venture out of the cave and be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger? If you're okay in your little comfort zone in your home, why would you venture out and try and become financially independent by trading the share market or opening a business or investing in property. It's not your place. It's for the other people. You just stay here nice and safe, Mr. or Miss.
Look, it's so true. And do you know, I wonder if there's even a difference between the way men and women approach this, because with women back in the caves, if we did the wrong thing, if we offended the wrong person and we were shunned, we were cast out from the caves, it wouldn't just be us suffering. They'd send our kids out with us too, and we would kill off that family line. So that unrest within our gut, that's what keeps us small as well. And I think it's something to be really aware of. I want to talk about the test that you can use by Pauline Clance, of course. I think that this is a really good one. If you think that you're relating even with 5% of what we're talking about, go to paulineroseclance.com, paulineroseclance.com. So it's a 20-question test. It's free, and she's fantastic with the amount of care and generosity of this lady. She's absolutely incredible. I'll perhaps give you a few examples.
Louise, before you move on, we'll put that website in the show notes to make it really easy for people to go to, rather than have to stop on the side of the road or jogging in the gym and try and remember what that website is.
Good idea. And we'll also put my special report there as well. I think that'll be a good idea. So Pauline's questions, some of the questions that she has there, and you can rate them. One of them could be, I tend to remember the incidents in which I've not done my best more than those times I have done my best. And another one, I can give the impression that I'm more competent than I really am. And also another one, I often compare my ability to those around me and think they may be more intelligent than I am. So those type of questions really strike to the core of what the imposter complex is and how it can affect you. If you're after something more sort of objective than listening to this podcast in terms of a score, that's the place to go. I think it's sometimes nice to do little quizzes and tests too. That's always fun. So I like to know where I stand.
But you're smarter than me, Louise. You're going to win the test and I'm not. I'm not up to it. I'm not good enough.
Well, let's talk about that, because really we need to talk about how can we flex that muscle and how can we start to combat that. Now, one of the beautiful areas of psychology is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I do love that. It's absolutely key in combating this if you feel like you've got a huge dose of it. But let's look at if we're just dealing with everyday imposter syndrome, because everybody has those voices. I want to talk about some of the things that you can do to overcome those thoughts. So firstly, I think it's good to take credit for small triumphs. Just say thank you. Just say, if somebody says, hey, you cooked a beautiful dinner, say thank you. If somebody says, you're looking really good today, say thank you. You know, we white ant ourselves. We say, oh, it was nothing. Oh, I just followed the recipe. Oh, yes, well, my sister put this together for me. Do you know how eroding that is to our psyche? It is absolutely sin in my language. I'm not letting my children do this. I'm not letting them say anything other than thank you to a compliment. And I don't let my traders do that either, because I don't think it's fair on yourself and you're training yourself into very bad habits. You're actually really good with that, Michael, because I've given you a lot of compliments over the years and you do say thank you.
It's one of the things I learned a long time ago. And interestingly, one of the things I've taught my children and one of the things I've taught my team, because there are a couple of team members I've got 60 staff who I've recognised have become very proficient at what they are able to do, but they're holding themselves back and sabotaging themselves. And when they listen to this podcast, one or two of them are going to think, he's talking about me. That's their little voice in their head. But the answer is, I've told them it's okay to say thank you. It's good to say thank you. Both sides win from it.
That's right. And then you don't erode your own feelings of competence. Another thing that I think is good to do is to seek out constructive criticism on things that don't affect your self-image or your identity. So you can work your way up to seeking big criticism, but not right now. Just break that cycle of self-doubt, self-sabotage. Just ask for small things. Like, for example, I may ask you in the early days of us working together, oh, Michael, what do you think about this web page? Or something like, if I give you this special report, could you read it and provide a critique for me on it? Something that was small, easy to digest, but something that didn't affect my self-concept to the point of crippling me. And I think that's how we felt each other out to begin with as well, in terms of how far we can go in order to be each other's unreasonable friend. We didn't kick each other in the guts in the beginning, although
we're much more honest today. But I think this is something, it's really useful that we're sharing this with the listeners, because they will think, hey, Louise, she's a world expert in candlesticks. She's a world expert trader. She's so successful. Look what she's achieved in her life. That we are human, we are normal, and we have these doubts as well. So when you get them, that's okay. You're normal also. It's allowed. In fact, if it wasn't happening, something would be wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it is a part of maturing. You know, we mature as a trader, we mature as a property investor. And we don't start out at that very high end of investment in the very beginning. You know, you have to get those training wheels moving before you can actually kick them off and then fly down the hill. Now,
Louise, it's much harder today because of social media, and people on Instagram show the pretty pictures, and you see the highlight reels. You don't see all the stuff on the cutting room floor, as they say in the movie industry. You compare your chapter 5 to somebody's chapter 30, and you think, I can't be there. So there's even more feedback to reinforce your imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that comes into play as well. Yeah. Look, there's also a link between imposter thinking and depression. So if you do need help with this, really seek it. I think by now in this part of the recording, you've probably started to recognize quite a few things, but you will be able to answer whether it's debilitating in your life. And if it is, seek out a cognitive behavioral therapist. They're fantastic because I use a therapist. I just find them to be such a good sounding board. Don't see them very often, but certainly to know that that person is in my corner, I think is terrific. Now, I wanted to look at some of the lies that the imposter syndrome tells us. So one of them is you have self-doubt, so you will fail. Now, I'd be curious about your views with this, Michael. Every venture that you go into, are you 100% sure it's going to work, or do you have some level of self-doubt?
Well, talking about failing, I know that I'm going to fail. I'm actually a real success at failure, Louise, but I've actually become immune to it. I now use it as a learning experience. So it's not the failure itself, whether it's big or small, depending upon the risk involved, monetary or otherwise, I will temper the decisions I make, the actions I take, but I'm prepared to fail knowing that I've just found something that doesn't work and I'll get to the next level. So if you don't take risks, in fact, that's probably the biggest risk of all, staying exactly where you are in your comfort zone, held in there by your imposter syndrome. So yes, I do know things will go wrong, and I still get a knot in my tummy at times, but that's okay. But I also have a backup plan and know how I'm going to get myself out of it. I'm much more cautious as a risk taker, as a business person, as an investor than I was young. So that's the other extreme, the naivety and stupidity. One of the worst things that can happen, I've found, to beginning investors is get it right first time. They think they're smarter than they are when there was an element of the market doing things, helping them along. So you've got to have the right balance, Louise.
I love that. You know, there's actually another world-renowned researcher in this area, Tanya Geisler. She's been fantastic as well to learn about the imposter syndrome and how it affects people. We've interviewed her on our show, talkingtrading.com.au. Her thought is that it sets you up to say that you can't admit vulnerability. I remember before I knew Tanya personally, I watched her TED Talk and she came on stage and she actually said, look, I'm feeling really nervous. This is not my skill set. And I feel that you're going to judge me, something along those lines. And I just thought, ooh, that's that's really vulnerable. Like usually people come on stage and they do the big arms wide type of thing with a big smile and start off with a kick. But she started out like a little mouse and then became the lion that roared. And I love that because there's so much to be said for relatability and also just non-ego driven behavior if you can admit that you're vulnerable. And I think you'd relate with that too, wouldn't you, Michael? It's not like you're saying that I've been a superstar from the beginning.
No, and that's where I said at the beginning, you shouldn't judge where you are compared to somebody who's a lot further along the way. These thoughts we're discussing, the mistakes that we make, the little failures along the way are normal. And if you expect anything different, you're going to be sourly disappointed.
Line number 3 is you're not ready. Now, this is huge. We feed ourselves this lie far too often. We let ourselves off the hook with this lie. Well, maybe when the kids start school next year, I'll do my first property investment. Or maybe when they start high school or university or move out of home or get married, then I'll do my first property. And I've heard these people say the same excuses about the markets. It's almost laughable. It's very hard because they think they're giving themselves a very logical excuse why they can't trade. But really all they're doing is delaying because their little imposter sitting on their shoulder wearing devil horns is saying, you're not ready. But they wouldn't have ever been ready for their first kiss, their first child, their first job. Nobody is ever fully ready for anything. And have you felt that way in your life too, Michael? Because, you didn't start where you are now with 60 employees. You've got Metropole behind you. You've got this successful podcast that you're doing. You've got all of these directors that look to you for guidance and support. You've got all of your property investors hanging off your every word. You didn't start there. And I don't know whether you would have felt ready for that if that had have been take you back 20 years. Would you have been ready for all of that if that had have happened 20 years ago?
I wouldn't have ever imagined myself where I am today. Having said that, it came from having a plan. Interestingly, I remembered that 25 or so odd years ago, I had a major upheaval in my life with a divorce and my asset reallocation program, as I like to call it, after a divorce. And I actually went to a 3-day seminar at Coolum from Brad Sugars, who's still around. He's moved to America, and it was an entrepreneurial seminar. But what I did was I planned my life. I had a goal, and I then did what I had to do to get where I wanted to go. So I planned to become the person I planned to become and took all the action to do that. But I never imagined that I would be where I am today, and I couldn't have stepped up to that without people around me. So having the right people and the motivational people and having unreasonable friends like you and having business coaches and mentors and a mastermind group made a difference. But again, you can only do it stepwise. If you go too far out, you're liable to fail. And along the way, as I said, lots of failures, some little, some big. And you know what? Many of them self-inflicted because I thought I was smarter than I was. The market soon humbles you, doesn't it, Louise?
Yes, definitely. You can't continue along with the big ego and expect to keep making profits. It just doesn't work that way.
No. So I guess this is, again, a useful conversation, the sort of stuff that you and I do when we get together regularly in our own mastermind group and talk about our businesses, our marketing, our own lives, that people can hear what's going on inside our heads, Louise.
Line number 4 is it's a matter of time until you blow it. Now, I have definitely heard this. And in fact, there's been a study by Alliance just after the GFC, and 1 in 2 women believed that they'd become bag ladies. Now, if you think of the uncertainty that leads to, that's awful. They think that even though they've achieved in the past, that the future doesn't seem likely that they'll continue achieving. They feel that they're just going to blow up what they've achieved. And I think that can be insidious. That's where I feel where you need a team. You need to allow yourself to connect and to draw from their strength, because you can't be strong at all times, Michael.
Well, interestingly, it's the old thing we've talked about a few times. It's not feeling worthy. I don't deserve this. And it goes back to the things you heard, the things you experienced, the things you saw as a child, some of those negative thoughts that your parents put in your head, even though they were well-meaning, because we were taught to be modest. We were taught not to ask for things. We were taught not to negotiate by a lot of our parents. Again, that depends which culture you come from and what was going around, what was discussed around your kitchen table. But that still is there subconsciously programmed into your mind, because a lot of what you do, a vast percentage of what you do every day, is happening at an unconscious level. And that's why I think it's really important to have these discussions, to bring them to the surface, to recognize them, so you can replace these disempowering beliefs and these poor habits with better habits, Louise.
And there's another lie that we tell ourselves. They don't mean that praise. They're just being nice. Now, this is a horrible thing. I think it's really striking to the core of our insecurities. And when that sort of thing happens, when somebody says to you, you've done well, do you say to them, well, it was nothing really? Oh, yeah, but I'll probably screw up the next property investment. So I think that the profit on this first investment was just a fluke. If you hear anything like that coming out of your mouth, stop mid-sentence. Just arrest it. Don't let that out, because as soon as the subconscious hears that, it's going to believe it. And that's where the little imposter, he can grow in strength, puff up his chest and say, hey, I've got you in my grip now. And I think that that's something that you're very good at as well. You accept praise and you don't fight against that. I'm sure that's been a part of your success, Michael.
Yeah, that's probably because I got a bigger ego than you, Louise.
Which isn't a bad thing.
I love praise. So my ego's bigger and better than yours.
I like that. Yeah. So look, I just wanted to come back to the concept.
I got a better one. It's because I'm better than you.
Go on.
Maybe we should. But maybe we should cut that bit out and re-record the podcast.
I think I'm in charge of editing this one, so it will stay. Honestly, Michael, you crack me up. Look, I'm going to top that, and I'm going to say I want to circle back to support. I think having support is so key, and that's one of the difficulties, that when you are in the grips of the imposter syndrome, it likes you to stay alone, because alone there's nobody to combat your thoughts. There's nobody to say, well, hang on, that's not right. Or have you thought about the time when you achieved this? And I think that that can be a real catch. The imposter syndrome likes us alone and in the dark, in the corner, without a voice, not speaking out, with no feedback loop to be able to improve our own behavior. What can people do to combat the imposter syndrome and to really remove it from their life altogether and just banish its effect?
Well, I think the first thing they should do is listen to this podcast again. There was so much gold you shared with us that it would do it injustice just to listen to it once, because we're making people aware of things. You know, there's things you know and there's things you know you don't know. But I think we've enlightened a whole group of people with a whole lot of things they didn't even know they didn't know. And then it's not going to go away in one go. These are habits. These are ideas that have been ingrained in us many years ago that we've carried for most of our adult life. And so for that reason, don't expect it to go away with one listening or one reading. But it's useful to actually get your life partner, your spouse, and probably even your teenage children to listen to this, because let's, as a group, get together and then hang around the right sort of people. One of the best ways to get to the next level is to get rid of the negative people in your life. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to get rid of them forever, but because we all have some of those in our family, but hang around them less and be around more positive people, but also get part of a mastermind group of people who are going to have your back and want you to move forward, and get a mentor or a couple of mentors in different areas of your life. And by the way, to me, a real mentor, Louise, is somebody that you actually pay. We all have these virtual mentors that you read about. You read their blogs on the internet or listen to their podcasts. You can only go so far that way. You actually need to get the right people around you and somebody who's accountable. And sometimes the best way of doing that is to pay them.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that you can go quite a long way with free resources. You know, idea behind the podcast is that we are giving free information, and that is an introduction level. It's certainly not the advanced levels that you take people through in Wealth Retreat, your mentorship program, all of the accelerated wealth programs that you put together, Michael. It's just a scratch on a scratch. So just perhaps if we could talk about our podcast, because I do believe that is a great place to start. So as you know, my podcast is talkingtrading.com.au. Free subscription. Each week we interview traders to bring on your best. They bring your A game to the case. And it's not just traders, it's people who have that wealth mindset, that advanced way of thinking. And Michael, tell us a bit more about your podcast.
Well, I'm an auditory learner, so I like listening to podcasts. I like learning that way. Some people are visual, so I have videos like you do, and I write books because different people learn it differently. But clearly the podcast seems to be the new blog today when people are listening to it on the road. Just the way our traffic is in our big capital cities means you're spending so much time going backwards and forwards to work, or people can multitask and do it in other ways. So the Michael Yardney podcast, I started, well, it's actually getting close to 2 years now, and I've been very proud of it. It's continuously ranks in the top 10, 15 business podcasts in Australia every month, close to 50,000 downloads. And I talk about not just property, but it's basically about success, about money, and there are separate segments about rich habits, poor habits with my good friend Tom Corley.
Love those habits. Yeah.
Once a month, we have a business podcast, Grow a Business, Not a Job, with Mark Creedon. So I've now brought it out to be twice a week, and you can get it wherever you get podcasts on your favourite app, the Michael Yardney podcast. And what I really love, Louise, is when people actually come up to me at seminars, and it happens in shopping centres. Hey, are you Michael Yardney? I listened to your podcast. You look just like what you look like on that picture there. They don't say you sound like what you sound like, but whatever. But they come and say thank you. And as you said a moment ago, I know one of the reasons you're doing this and the reason I'm doing this is because we want to give people the opportunity to step up to the next level because they deserve it. And there's so many vested interests and biased messages out there that to be able to give an independent view to help people bring them up and do it for free. Sure, we're running a business, but this is just a way of giving back to the community. If you get to the top, I think it's our turn to pull some other people up with us.
Love it, Michael. It's been fantastic chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to the many projects we have planned in the future.
It's always fun, Louise. Thank you very much. Well, there was a lot in this show, wasn't there? Louise Bedford gave us a great understanding of imposter syndrome. And if you know somebody who would benefit from listening to this, there's a share button at the bottom of every podcast app. Just send this to somebody or tell somebody about the show. Just like I want to help you become better as an investor, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, I'd like you to help others along the way as well. And I appreciate the fact that people find benefit in it because I keep getting these great reviews. And when I read out your review, email me, michael@metropole.com.au, and I'll give you a copy of one of my books, like the review I got from Miss Mandy, who said, "Thank you, Michael. I religiously listen to every podcast from you. Now I love every one of them. I feel like such an expert myself now in property. Your advice is honest and realistic and genuine. That's rare to find. Thank you for giving me something to look forward to every week." Well, thank you, Miss Mandy. And now I'm presenting these shows twice a week. And there was also a great review left from K8TTY2017. Okay. Well, anyway, if you know who you are and you email me, michael@metropole.com.au, I'd be happy to send you a copy of my book. And the review said, "I listen to Michael Yardney's podcast on my daily commute to work, but I have to say I love the book Rich Habits, Poor Habits. I asked for this book from my kids for my birthday, and I enjoy reading every page. I've highlighted all my favourite sections, made margin notes, and even transferred memorable phrases into my paper-based planner and diary. It even has post-it notes scattered throughout, and I really like hearing both Michael and Tom having their chats. You come across as a pair of mates, having a good old chin wag, but what you talk about is not frivolous. They're gems of wisdom, great advice. I'm wealth level 1, striving to reach wealth level 2, but afraid that I've left my run too late. However, at least I'm on the journey. No, you've not left your run too late. Thank you for the great comments. Yes, I love my chats with Tom as well, and they come once a month in between the regular Michael Yardney podcasts, and you can read Tom's blogs and watch our videos at propertyupdate.com.au, my daily blog. I look forward to being with you again real soon as I bring you the Michael Yardney podcast twice a week. In the meantime, spend your time wisely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?